it was pretty easy for me to understand because I was defined by what I did every day, not who I was. And so I would wake up and I would have anxiety if I didn't do work or if I didn't create a result or if I didn't write an email. And I struggled for years to literally be able to just be at the dinner table with my family or not have my phone on me or not be
Sure.
on a call. And it was like I tried to fill my day, like from every waking moment, with some sort of external thing. And I tell people it was really easy to understand. I avoided being in a relationship with the one person I'm guaranteed to spend the rest of my life with, whether I like it or not.
Wow.
And it was me.
George, thank you very much for taking the time out. I really appreciate this. You
Yeah,
know,
I'm stoked.
so quickly, like I said, I always tell everybody when I speak on stage, I tell people the shortest distance between two human hearts is always a story. You tell people a story, and that's how they remember you. So, how I'm going to start this interview is I'm going to tell you a story of who I am, and then
Mhm.
in the same format, you tell us a story of who you are.
I love it.
Excellent. We call this format the hero introduction. So, my name is Avi Arya, father of two girls, six dogs, husband to a superwoman, a streetcar racer turned hotelier, now social media marketer, and founder of Internet Moguls. Over to you, George.
Oh, well, I am George Bryant, husband to a superwoman, father to two kids, 15 and 4, boy and girl, three pet snakes, Marine for 12 years, world record holder, 22-week New York Times bestselling author, number one app in the world, and realized that none of it made me happy until I put my heart back in marketing. So I trademarked the term relationships beat algorithms, and now I help everybody love their customers and build their business.
I love that. And for everybody who's listening to this now or in the future, he had no idea I'm going to ask him to do a hero introduction like this, and he totally nailed it. Excellent.
I realized early on in my life that I love talking, so I might as well get a career where I get paid to do it and help people in the process.
Lovely. Perfect. George, tell me, all these mics that we have versus the mic that you're wearing, is this always more, is it because the mic is always close to your mouth? Is it
Yeah.
more clear?
Yeah, I move a lot. So I'm
Right.
really animated. I tell people like I sweat passion, I sweat email marketing, like I sweat heart. And so when I get going, like I lean in, I get sweaty, and I have a closet full of microphones that are just here, like Hiles and Shores, but I
Wow.
always miss. And so my team is like, I need to glue one to your face. And
Right.
so they found me this headset. So I look like I'm flying an airplane, but everybody can always hear me. And so that's why I wear this one.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, George, tell us a little bit about how you said that you were doing a lot of stuff, which was very exciting, but
Yeah.
your heart was not in it. For all the people watching, how do you determine if your heart is not in it? Because when you're not making money and you're not successful, then it's very easy to understand. But when you're successful like you were, New York Times bestseller and all of that, how then do you decide that this is not for me?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think it went through phases of entrepreneurship, and it was easy in the beginning, but also in the beginning, when I wasn't happy, that became fuel to create happiness. And so it was a very, very fine line. And so once I became quote unquote paper successful, it was pretty easy for me to understand because I was defined by what I did every day, not who I was. And so I would wake up and I would have anxiety if I didn't do work or if I didn't create a result or if I didn't write an email. And I struggled for years to literally be able to just be at the dinner table with my family or not have my phone on me or not be
Sure.
on a call. And it was like I tried to fill my day, like from every waking moment, with some sort of external thing. And I tell people it was really easy to understand. I avoided being in a relationship with the one person I'm guaranteed to spend the rest of my life with, whether I like it or not.
Wow.
And it was me. And so as I would lean into that and I would get on a flight, and I flew 160 times a year for consulting and speaking, and like, you and I have very similar, lanes here. And
Right.
I couldn't even be on an airplane without having a movie on or having my phone in my hand or having something to do. I couldn't read a book. I couldn't just sit. I couldn't look out the window. And it just constantly felt like if I wasn't distracting myself with something, that I was unhappy. And so I had to really, really lean into that. And so it was easy for me and I don't say this because it was technically easy, but it was easy for me to create the results, the external results. So it was easy for me to become a New York Times bestseller, to write a book, to launch an app, to become a millionaire, to have my first 6-figure month, 7-figure month, 8-figure month. Like that was easy because
Wow.
I was weighing all my success on the results. What was hard was being the person that nobody saw when I couldn't show it to them, not on social
Right.
media, not in my life, like not out at dinner, but like actually just sitting on my couch and being like, who am I? And I could never
Right.
answer that question.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. And then one day it was like, not one day, but it kept chipping away at you, and you were like, I need, if I've already found my own inner confidence that I can build things when I'm not 100% happy, imagine what I can build when I'm happy.
Totally. Yeah. And it wasn't, and I'll save everybody the fairy tale land. I didn't learn the lesson with fairy tales. I learned the lesson with pain. My wife left me. She was 8 months pregnant. We were a couple weeks away from bankruptcy because on the surface, all the
Right.
results were coming in and there was plenty of money, but I was also burning through all of it to try to
Sure.
find some semblance of happiness. And
Right.
quite frankly, I was driven by chaos. I was fueled by having to prove something. So every time I would make something work, like I remember I made like $250,000 in a day. And then literally I had it spent before it came in. And I was like, oh, it's hard again. I have to go again. And so it
Right.
was exhausting. I ended up hospitalized, adrenal fatigue, gained 80 pounds. My wife
Wow.
left me. And so it was a really, really, really dark, dark time. And when that stacked on top of my childhood and my military career that I never worked on, the death that I witnessed, 3 wars, 12 years in the military service, and all of it kind of culminated, I really, I really understood that I was basically slowly committing suicide while pretending to live.
Wow.
And eventually, everything that I supposedly cared about got taken away from me. And I realized that I couldn't have it if I didn't really work on myself. And so I literally, I literally left. I flew to Costa Rica and I spent 7 days in silence alone. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I came home and I was like, I have to do things differently. And I deleted social media. I changed my phone number and I gave away my company as a Christmas present to a student. I walked away overnight. I transferred the entire corporation of a multi 7-figure company away and I walked away and I disappeared from the world for 3 years.
3 years. Wow. In India, this 7 days not talking in silence is called Vipassana. And I've
I
heard
love
lots of,
Vipassana.
yeah, I've
It's
heard lots
hard
of,
though. I mean, like for me, like this like, American kid that grew up in the military who prides himself on talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, which I'm sure you can tell, it was
uh,
challenging. And so now it's a part of my daily practice. So I'd say like one of the reasons that I'm as successful as I am is because I probably spend close to 4 hours a day in silence and solitude.
lovely. I love that. Tell me, George, uh, to go from one level of where you are
Yeah.
to a next version of yourself, you have to be acknowledging some patterns that you have, which might
Yes.
have served you in the past or not,
1000%.
and then you have to change those patterns. So a lot of people lose weight, start drinking again or start eating again, and they get back, and that pattern. So, and there are patterns in health, in fitness, in real estate, in everything, mindset, spirituality. What pattern did George have to break? Which was your toughest pattern? How did you acknowledge it, and how did you break it?
That is one of the best questions I've ever been asked. And I love it. Thank you for asking it. The toughest pattern that I had to break was me deriving my value from external validation, like me thinking that I was only as good as you saw me as, like that what I posted on social media, what business results I created were the only things that determined my value as a human being. And so it was the hardest one to break because it's sneaky. It shows up everywhere. How I dress when I go to dinner, what bottle of wine I order at the table,
Ah,
what
right.
program I sell, what my body looks like, what kind of car I drive, how many team members I have, how I treat those team members. And so it was a chameleon belief that showed up constantly, but no matter what, I could be like, okay, I'm being really good in my marriage. Like I'm loving my wife to love my wife, not codependently, but then in work, I would
Okay.
send an employee a gift or hold a meeting because I was feeling insecure. And
Mm.
so it was really, really, really sneaky. And so the level of awareness that got me there wasn't from actually noticing that pattern. It was getting really good feedback in all the other areas that were me avoiding that pattern. Right. And so I had to work really hard on creating a team of people around me that were always safe to give me authentic feedback. Like it was a literally, I am not above you. I do not work over you. Like, if anything, I work for my team. Like I am
Right.
not the boss. I might have the label and it might be my face, but I get bossed around 24/7. I
Sure.
come to my desk in the morning and it's like, hey, like full example, I do not have access to my inbox. I do not have access to my social media, and I do not have access to my own websites. I can't log in. I can't build anything. I come down, there's a message sitting on my desk that says, do this, do this, do this, do this. And they're like, when you're done, go work out and then go have family time. And that's it. Like literally. And so I surrounded myself first with a group of people that saw me for my potential, not for where I was. And it was a very scary thing to do because it required me to be authentic and vulnerable, and me to be willing to look at my teammates and my team members and be like, hey, I'm scared today. Like, I don't know what the answer is. I'm struggling today. I'm a little sad today. I don't know how to solve it. And then me also being open to them, being like, yeah, but that's why we're here. That's why we work with you. That's why we're your team, and being open and receptive to that feedback. And so, in that realm, with my wife, with my children, with my coaches and mentors, as well as with my team members, and including my students and customers, I have an open door, two-way, let me have it policy. And I mean, let me have it. Like, if I cut you off, if I show up inconsistently, if I break my word to you, if I under deliver, I want you to tell me. And I want you to tell me so we can acknowledge it. And in the practice of that, it created an awareness as to where it was coming from, which is I always just wanted to please people. I wanted to please people because I wanted people to like me. And I wanted people to like me because I genuinely wanted to help them, but I didn't know how to derive my self-worth. And so that practice allowed me to start realizing where I needed to lean into myself, where I needed to get into a daily practice, where I needed to love myself, where I needed to see that my value wasn't predicated on the results I create or other people's execution, but just on who I choose to be in that moment. And that led me down a really, really amazing path. And so now my daily practice, the way that I live my life, is constantly in reflection of how did I show up today? Was this great? Like, how can I shift it? How can I get deeper into myself? How can I communicate more effectively? How can I say more with less words? And that was kind of it. And so that pattern, I feel like entrepreneurship is seriously the fastest path to enlightenment. Like, if you're familiar with any, like Buddhism, the term like bodhisattva is like one who chooses to
Yep.
surpass enlightenment for the betterment of humanity. Entrepreneurship is the fastest path because it's a guaranteed personal development lesson every single day in everything that we do.
Oh, I love that. I need to write that down.
And so when I look at entrepreneurship and I look at these beliefs and like how I was able to recognize them, I feel like one of the most neglected topics in entrepreneurship, but one of the biggest tools, is acknowledging what it is in its existence. And so we become entrepreneurs or business owners because we're like, we want to create something. And then when we're in it, creating it, we're getting afraid. It's uncertain. It's unclear. Where's the money going to come from? And I was like, yes, but you have to remember that that's why we did this. We gave up somebody else's paycheck and gave up somebody's path so that we could build our own. And so we have to always remember that everything that we're doing, we're stepping into the unknown. We're choosing to give up comfort and safety to create comfort and safety in a whole lot of ambiguity. And so for me, one of the biggest tools has always been the awareness of like what we're actually doing. Like, there is never a guaranteed ad that works. There's never a guaranteed product. There's never a guaranteed service, a guaranteed team. And the faster we're hyper aware of that truth, the faster we have all the tools we need to succeed. And so I spend a whole lot of my time in stoicism doing memento moris of like, what might happen? Like, what might this look like? Yep, that's going to fail. My ad account's going to catch that down. I might lose 100 grand tomorrow. Or like in the case of 6 months ago, I lost $1.2 million in 90 days. And it
Wow.
hurt. And it hurt. And then I had to continually to remind myself that like, okay, it hurt, but I can't win the race in the same race that I'm losing. And like, I have to get off the track. I have to look at my race car. I have to make some adjustments, and I have to figure out when the time is right to get back on the track to try to race again. And I had to really look at it. And everyone's like, oh, how hard is it? You lost 100 grand in MRR a month. You lost 2 companies because of COVID and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I did. I'm like, why are you so happy? I was like, nobody took my toolbox away. I
Right.
was like, a hurricane just came and knocked off the top floor of the house, but all we have to do is rebuild it. I have all the tools that I need.
Nice. I like that.
And so it's,
Like,
for me, it's this constant pursuit of awareness. Like, it's just this constant pursuit of awareness, agnostic of emotion. Like, where am I? Like, what's in front of me? Like, what am I feeling? What am I experiencing? Like, what is the path in front of me? And of course, I feel anxiety. I have depression. I have stress. I have all of those thoughts and feelings. But the old adage is you can't read the label from inside the bottle.
mm-hmm.
And so we have to be in this practice of understanding that those feelings are there, but those are not us. They're just feelings. And when
I
we can
love.
sit with them and we can be with them and we can hold them or process them, on the other side of it typically comes clarity. And so one of my teachers and one of my business partners, Stefano Stefandos, always says to me, if you want to deepen your impact, you have to deepen your practice.
Wow.
And
I
it's
love
such a
that.
powerful, profound statement in coming to these awarenesses. So that's a very long-winded answer to a very short question. But the
No,
awareness
no,
and
no.
distinction for me was using everything that came into my day every day as a window into the deeper belief that I had to shift. And let me just hit the fast forward button to anybody. The reason the hero's journey is a circular pattern, the reason that anything happens in systems and circular motions is because it never stops. There's no finish line. And so when you said get to a next level, that never goes away. The only thing I've learned at the different levels of my success in entrepreneurship is that the gap between changing levels gets longer. And
Ah,
so it was really easy to go from like 10 grand a month to 100 grand a month. It wasn't so easy to go from 100 grand a month to 1 million a month. And then
right.
once you get there, it wasn't so easy to go from 1 million to 5, but
Sure.
it's possible. But each one of them has their own journey in. And like you said, the tools that got me here, they served their purpose. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but it requires a different set of tools to get me to the next level. And most of the time, that means putting the tools down, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture and saying, okay, what tools do I need to bring forward? And what tools do I need to create, buy, or hire to build the next level of this evolution?
Create, buy, or hire. Sure. Yeah. It could be coaching, could be mentorship.
Coaching,
Yeah.
anything. I mean, it could be just simple thinking.
Yeah.
Like the amount of times, like I wish I had a coach or a mentor that was like, hey, slow down. Like temperance is a gift. Like you do not win a race. Like race car drivers know this. You would know this better than anybody. But I've asked people before, I said, hey, there's 2 pedals in the car, 3 if it's a manual. They're like, yeah. I'm like, which one wins the race? And everybody says the gas pedal.
Hmm.
But race car drivers know the brake pedal wins the race.
Yeah.
And so we as entrepreneurs need to understand that the brake pedal exists as well. And it's okay to press it. And it's okay to take a step back. And it's okay to slow down for a moment to win the long race.
That is fantastic. I love that. And I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so honest and vulnerable to share this, because when people see somebody like you giving it out there in an interview like this, they do feel the sense of freedom to say, I too can acknowledge my feelings. So that
Oh,
was really powerful.
you should see it when I keynote. People think I'm nuts. Like if I'm giving a keynote, I've had people ask me a question and it reminded me of that moment. Like that moment in my journey, like that moment where I thought it was done.
Right.
And like I've started bawling my eyes out and I was like, and here's the secret. I actually feel more of it now and I'm scared. Like just because my bank account has an extra comma and it doesn't mean I'm not scared. I'm actually more scared. I have more to lose. Like
Sure.
I remember when I lost my first $1,000 and then I remember when I lost my first $1,000,000.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I would go back to losing $1,000 in a moment's notice, except I have to understand that that's the game of growth. And
Understood.
the longer we can understand that we're humans, like we're emoting human beings, we are relational beings, and we are not robots. Like the gift that we all have is range. That is the gift. That is probably one of the greatest human gifts that exist on this planet is range. And I believed for so long in everybody's coaching and everybody's books and everybody's principles that I was supposed to be this one way. I was just supposed to be motivated or confident or clear or linear. And it's like, no, there's moments I have to be those. And there's also moments I have to swing the other way and reflect on them and recover. And it's a gift for entrepreneurs. And so if you're listening to this, like, let me tell you, you're not alone. This is not a solo game to be played. There's not one successful entrepreneur, Olympic athlete, or human being that has ever gotten there alone. You'll be hard pressed to find me one because all of us have parents. Somebody
Right.
helped us, somebody fed us, and we are the only creature on the planet that requires somewhere close to 12 years of nurturing before we can even consider being self-sustaining. And
Right.
so it's a team game. And the
Mm,
faster we accept that it's a team game, and no matter where we are in the process and where we are in the journey is where we're supposed to be, and that's a gift, the faster we all win.
I love that. I love that. It's a team game for sure. I need to write this down. It's a team. Awesome. Can I ask you where you get these amazing hoodies from?
Yeah, you can. I'm an hoodie addict. So, full disclosure, they're normally pink. I wear pink shoes every day. It's my favorite color. It's
Nice,
my brand
nice.
color. Yes, there's this clothing company that I love in San Diego. It's called ASRV. It stands for Aesthetic Revolution. It's asrv.co. And they've never given me a discount, and I buy every one of their clothes. And I love them because every time they break, I let them know and they send me a new one. And they just have some of the best customer service and the best quality clothing ever. And
I
so
love.
my shorts are from them, my hoodies from them, my t-shirts from them. And my wife's like, you're like a walking billboard and they don't even pay you. I'm like, I know, but they do it right. And that's what happens. You support companies that do it right.
Absolutely. I love that. And tell me, you know what? I want to be vulnerable in front of you as well. So, as a 44-year-old, and I on the 29th of October, I turned 44. But when I was 18 years old, born and brought up in New Delhi, India, all I wanted to do was race street cars. Uh, my dad lost everything in his business. I could not go abroad to study. I thought I'd go overseas, learn how to race cars and make it a career or whatever. That didn't happen. I got into my dad had a small inn, a motel, like a 28-room motel. I
Mm,
started working over there. There was a new phenomena on the market called the internet. We were one of the first ever Indian motels or any hospitality company to go live outside of the five-star hotels. Business just quadrupled in the next few years because we were nobody else was doing it. Standalone
yeah.
hotels never doing the internet. Then I built 100 travel websites. 96, 97 of them failed. Two of them did extremely well. That was my second innings. So hospitality with my dad, travel websites on my own. By then, I was getting to known in the marketplace. TripAdvisor, Facebook, all of these companies came to India. Some of them gave me huge opportunity to speak on large stages. That gave me opportunity. People said, "Can you consult?" 2009, I started a digital marketing agency with a four-member team, completely bootstrapped. 11 years, we grew it from 4 to 200 people, working with 700 clients all over the world. Became a digital marketer, became a father, six dogs. All of the amazing stuff started happening. Then I realized I don't want to travel so much. So I started teaching online, started doing webinars, and now we have webinars with 600 to 1500 people coming in. We also have 30. My biggest webinar was 3200 people working with us the entire day. Now I do webinars every week. Most of them are sold out. So in this journey, I've obviously overcome some things, and there are some things which are still in pattern. I'm not able to. I don't have the guts or the mind frame or the discipline, and I'm still trying to work on them. But the one thing, and I'm a very empathetic person. My
Mhm.
mother has a huge influence on my life. I'm very emotional to people's feelings. I will never say I was very overweight as a child, so I can never ever ridicule somebody for the way they look. For me, everybody looks beautiful and all of that.
Mhm.
However, I'm very scared of snakes. And here
Yeah.
I'm talking to somebody who is so cool and has three snakes. What
Yeah.
should I do to get over this fear of snakes?
Yeah. You know what's funny is fear for me. So I was overweight too. I lost 100 pounds and I struggled with bulimia for 15 years. Like I
Wow.
struggled with eating
Wow.
disorders. I was an addict. I was an opiate addict. I attempted to take my own life. I mean, it's been, I don't even call it a dark past. It's been a journey, and I look at it now and it was a gift, but I learned I learned something very, very interesting about fear. And when I look at it, like as human beings, we're born with only two fears: the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling.
Okay.
Everything else is taught. Everything else is taught, which means everything else is just running on the program that we have between our two ears, but they're not really true. And it's the resistance of fear that amplifies its sound. And it's typically the space created and the acknowledgement of the fear that gets rid of it, right? And so, like, I was afraid of snakes, literally afraid of snakes. And this is
Really?
what's hilarious. Yeah. So I was afraid of snakes. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I have a 4-year-old son. And my wife looks at me maybe a year ago and she's like, hey, listen, we got to get the kids some pets. I was like, I don't have it in me to take care of other dogs right now. I'm traveling, I'm working. Cause I always know daddy ends up as the caregiver and I'm okay with that.
Right.
And I was like, cool. She's like, all right, well, how about we get, our daughter wanted a hamster and my son wanted a fish. And I was like, cool, I can do that. Right. Like that's pretty easy. They can handle them. So I'm sitting at work one day and I had to get on a flight. And so I fly and she calls like, we're going to the pet store. We're getting the pets for the kids. I'm like, awesome. I fly. And then I was like, how'd the pets go? She's like, yeah, we got everything. The kids are happy. I didn't think twice about it. I did not think twice about it. I come home 2 days
No.
later to a ball python in my kitchen. And I was like, that's the thing that eats the hamster. What is that? And she's like, this is a snake. And I was like, well, I'm aware that that's a snake. And I was never afraid of like snakes biting me, but like the texture and the touching and the
Yeah.
unfamiliarity, right? Like we're
Yes.
taught to like pet a
Yes.
dog or, to do that.
Right.
And so I was like, okay. And here's my 3-year-old holding a snake, playing with it. It's like crawling on it. It's snuggling. My daughter's playing with it. And I was like, okay, who do I get to be in this moment? Like, who do I get to be in this moment? And I literally looked at my 3-year-old and I was like, BB's, daddy's a little bit afraid of the snake. Can you help me? And I literally just asked my 3-year-old for help. This is going to sound so crazy, but it was that little inner child in me that had this fear that was taught somewhere, either from an experience or a lack of an experience or a lack of education. I was like, well, let me go to the most innocent person around me and ask him. And I asked my 3-year-old and he was like, it's okay, daddy, sit down. At 3 years old, I just sat on the floor and he brought the snake over and just put it in my hands.
Oh my God.
And it was just like this amazing thing. And I don't know why I felt so safe with my 3-year-old handing it to me. And now we have 3 of them and one of them is going to be 9 feet. She's 6 feet now. And they're the best things in the world. They're an entrepreneur's, dream, the right snake. And I look at it and I've asked myself quite a few times, like, what was I really afraid of? Like I've meditated on this immensely. I was like,
Really?
what was I afraid of? Because it wasn't the snake. It was a memory or a trigger or an experience or lack of experience that my brain was creating that was associated with a snake. But a snake had never bit me. I'd never really done anything with a snake. It was this illusion. And my buddy Jim Quick says this all the time. Jim's a memory master, a brain expert, and 80% of our memories are made up. And what we forget is that our job as human beings is to survive. And so what our brain does is it stores memories and traumatic events in our body. And then our brain uses synapse and neural pathways to call on them in a moment's notice to keep us protected. But
Mm.
only 80% of it is false, only 20% of it accurate. The rest of it's made up. And so we get this feeling and we're like, oh, I'm out. But the longer we can learn, we call this the wedge, right? And so I'm going to start throwing book recommendations out. But Scott Carney wrote a book called The Wedge, and it came from doing cold therapy. And what really happens, and this is a gift for entrepreneurs when you think about fear, because fear is just unused energy, right? It's energy, it's a trigger, it's something that's in there. And so typically what happens is we'll experience fear, we'll get this feeling, and we immediately knee-jerk and react away. We
Okay.
immediately remove ourselves. We immediately go in the opposite direction. We immediately do something different, right? And so what we all have to practice is what we call the wedge, which is increasing the distance between trigger and response by training our autonomic nervous system to hold. And so we think about things like breath work or vipassana, like silent retreats. Like those aren't easy. There are parts of it that can be, but there are anxiety, fleeting thoughts, like overrunning thoughts. And we think about, cold therapy, right? Ice baths. I do ice baths every day, right? And everyone's like, you're nuts. It's so cold. And I was like, is it? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, cool. And then I look at them, I'm like, would you swim in an 85-degree swimming pool? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, how would you describe it? And they're like, comfortable. I'm like, cool. I was like, would you go into a 110-degree jacuzzi, 115? Like, yeah, I love it. It's so amazing. I was like, is it hurt? And they're like, no. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, that's a 30-degree difference. Would you go in a 55-degree swimming pool? They're like, no, it's cold and it hurts. I'm like, but does it? because it's
Hmm.
the same 30 degrees in an opposite direction
Right.
from the middle. I was like, we have this perceived belief that we tell ourselves over and over and over that the cold hurts. We don't tell ourselves that the hot hurts. But
Right.
really, when you're a child and you touch hot for the first time, you're like, ah, and we're like, no, it feels good. It's warm. We touch cold, we're like, oh, it's cold. It's freezing. You don't do that. Right now, I take ice baths every day, 20 to 30 minutes in 34-degree water. For you metric people, that's 1 to 2 Celsius. And I can sit in there for 30 minutes, breathe and sit there and swim. And it's
Oh
amazing.
my God.
Right. And so, but when I look at it, the feeling is the same. The feeling is the same. And so when I get back to this fear thing, I look at car accidents, right? I was like, have anybody listening to this? You remember like that time you were either in a car accident or almost in a car accident, like that gut, the adrenaline, the like, right? Like it, you almost get it and you're amped and you're upped for God, a couple hours sometimes, right? And it literally feels like death. And like, yeah. And they're like, that scares me. I was like, but have you ever realized that's the same exact feeling you get on a roller coaster?
Right.
And the only difference is our interpretation of them.
Yeah.
And
We
the only way that
pay and have fun.
we pay for that feeling, but then when the feeling happens with a different interpretation, we think it
Right.
equals death. And
Wow.
typically, the only difference is the awareness. And so the wedge is the ability to be comfortable in pressure, to realize that when resistance happens or a trigger happens, you have the ability to sit in it. You're not going to die. And the longer you can practice just being agnostic of response, typically the faster that feeling dissipates. And it's kind of like when you conquer those fears for the first time, typically it's the lead up, it's the, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And then it's always disappointing on the other side.
Right.
Because once you were there, all of this doesn't make sense anymore. And so I'm like, I don't care what people are afraid of. It could be snakes, could be cars, could be flying, could be heights. I was like, I don't need you to conquer your fear. What I need you to do is acknowledge and own the feelings and own your body and realize that you weren't born with that fear. And so you can practice your way out of anything as long as it's not the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. And we overcome those as well. But those are the only two that are biologically born into us in our consciousness. And so what I have found in my life is that most of the things that I experienced, most of the fears that I had, most of the things that I was afraid of that kept me stuck were just simply because I didn't practice the things every day that would allow me to see them differently and retrain a different behavior. And so when I look
Wow.
at people with fears, I was like, you just have to practice your way out of fear. I remember the first time I spoke on stage, right? Like you remember the first $1 million deal, the first time I hired my first employee, I was afraid.
Sure.
Like I do 20 to 30 interviews a week and I still get sweaty. I still get nervous. And I was like, cool, I get to practice. I get to practice. I get to practice. But the more that we're willing to practice, the faster we can actually shift all of those fears and all of those beliefs. And I'm saying this for everybody listening or watching. This is entrepreneurship. This is life in general, right? Like that, the same thing, right? Like Jim's a really good friend of mine. I love it. I feel like I'm his walking tweetable, but it's like this, you know what I mean? Like, pressure from the, pressure from the outside, pressure from the inside, right? When you look at an egg, it takes pressure to boil it to create an egg, but then it also takes pressure to crack it. Like it really depends on how you look at it,
Right.
on what's really, really happening. And we're human beings. Like we are creatures that evolved into this consciousness and is able to create and to do. And we love and celebrate resistance everywhere in our life, right? None of us go to the gym and we sit there and do nothing and expect to get stronger. We sweat a little bit. We hurt a little bit. We make it hurt a little bit more. We want to run. We run a little bit harder and we celebrate the resistance. And that resistance equals our growth. But then we look at our personal side
I love that.
and we look at our personal side and we have a little resistance like, oh, I'm afraid of that conversation. And instead of flexing that muscle, we avoid it, but then expect ourselves to grow. And so that comes back to that awareness. If I know that I'm going to make my body physically stronger by running and sweating a little bit and getting a little uncomfortable or lifting that weight and straining it, wouldn't it make sense that if I practice that same concept emotionally, if I just flex it a little bit more and I sit with it a little bit longer and I run just a little bit faster
Right.
emotionally, that muscle is going to get stronger as well? And so that's been one of my secrets to be able to hold and handle high pressure situations. And I was gifted with the experience of combat, right? Like I've been to Afghanistan and Iraq and those
Wow.
things. But it's in reflecting those things and realizing like what was underneath it. Like I never understood why we would train for 12 months for one day, but now
Right.
I understand.
Sweat more in war, so you bleed less. You sweat more in practice, so you bleed less in war.
That's really what it was. And it got to a point where we would practice so much that like I could close my eyes and do what I needed to do no matter what was going on around me. Right. But yet we're in entrepreneurship, we're in business, we're in life. And what we try to do is we try to protect the resistance and keep it out rather than accepting the resistance and letting it in.
Hmm. That is so powerful. You know what? Like I never do this. It's because I when we edit, we like to put timestamps and put in, the that I need two timestamps or three, and we're done. I've got six of
Love
these.
it. I love
That
it.
is fantastic. I asked your team for 30 minutes. We've already crossed our time. I want to respect your time. Thank you so
Oh
much,
yeah.
George. This has been fantastic. I wish my daughters were here. They could not make it because they're in school right now. But thank you so much. Like I said, we've been able to build a community which is now more than 200,000 people. They subscribe to us, come to our webinars, whatever. Anytime you're launching a book or a podcast or a new course, or want to do a JV, no JV, just talk to people in Asia. I live in Vancouver, go back and forth to India. We'd love to help you promote whatever amazing work that you're doing. Please ask
I
your
would,
team or to reach
yeah,
out
I
to
would
me.
love it.
And before we go, for our audience, if you can just put in the name of your book or your podcast, where can people
Yeah.
find you? What's the best way to get in touch with
Yeah,
you?
yeah. So I make it really, really easy. So if you haven't figured it out by this point, you're either in one of two camps. Like this guy is really crazy and I want more of it, or this guy
Right,
is really crazy and I want less of it. And either way, I love you.
right.
But my podcast is called The Mind of George because most people think it belongs in a straitjacket. So I put it in a podcast instead. And
Lovely.
so I release 3 podcast episodes a week about business, entrepreneurship, marketing psychology, customer journeys, mindset, and all the tools and the things and the resources that it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, business owner, and human. And so it's called The Mind of George Show. My website is at mindofgeorge.com. So www.mindofgeorge.com to make it really easy to remember. And hopefully you giggled at that because that humor will trigger a neural pathway to remember the website, which is why we do marketing.
I love that. I love that, George. I think we wanted to keep it everything about George and less about marketing, but we covered everything in this. I'm going to put the timestamp stamps, edit it, and when it goes out, we send you a copy for you to have a look at it. Like I said, anything that me or my team can do in Vancouver or any part of Asia to promote you and your work, we're always there. Just send us an email. Let us know this is what's coming up, and I need full on promotion just on a friendly basis. We'll be there, all out, going all guns blaring to help you out.
I would
George,
be honored and I'm going to call that one in, man. I appreciate it.
100%. And thank you very much, especially because as soon as I finish this interview, the first thing I'm going to do is go to asrv.co
Yeah, thank you.
and
And
order
thank you for
myself
having me.
100%. Thanks a
Thanks
lot.
for having
Take
me.
care.
All right. Bye-bye.